Let me just say a few things that have been occurring to me there, which is, there's a lot of noticing that a lot of people are feeling really tired and exhausted these days for no real explanation apart from maybe some spiritual soul level stuff, or people think it might be 5G, or maybe think they have ME or some kind of tick disease or whatever it might be that's just making people feel exhausted and just having to rest. Massive amounts of resting rather than being productive in the 3D world, or doing the things that we have to do in the 3D world, things that are on our mind, and putting pressure on ourselves that we're not doing the things that we have to do in the 3D world, or that we're not feeling compelled by the things that used to keep us so busy. In my experiences there in the last few weeks, and again today, I'm just realizing, wow, maybe with that tiredness and feeling the need to rest is actually need to let the mind itself kind of switch off, or letting the mind rest in peace. So if you can let yourself rest, what's actually happening is that the soul is being able to send images from the chosen future. So it's like choosing which version of the fourth dimension do you want to be in a few weeks' time, in a year's time, for the rest of your life. So this idea of changing timelines from the victimhood of the past to the resolution of victimhood in the future, to salvation through the new earth. So the soul is organizing synchronicities from what we would call the future, and sending those synchronicities down through the fourth dimension into our daydreaming and dream time. So I've been receiving images in my mind which are actually things that are like dream come true realities of actually just being happy. And I'm realizing those images are being sent from my soul down to my personality self, and my personality self, because it's being able to lie down and let myself rest, being able to, it's not physically lie down, but I mean being able to surrender to the intuition, to saying you are tired, just let yourself have a rest and then get up and do the things, instead of forcing myself to try and do far more things that are possible. And what I'm finding from those images coming from the future is that the resolution of things is actually just all the mist clearing away. It's not having to run around and shift all the 3D objects or make all the 3D phone calls. Things are actually being revealed to be much less complicated than they seemed to be when one was trying to figure it all out with one's mind, and thinking, oh, it's my responsibility that I have to do all these things and contact all these people and arrange the timing of when all these things flow one after another. The other bit of information that's popped along to me that's similar to this is something to do with the vagus nerve and the vagus system. And whatever the details about the vagus is, I'm not so knowledgeable, but somewhere along the line of what I read is that one of the symptoms of your vagus nerve not being functioning properly is not being able to rest. And this was all tied in with the idea of parasites in the gut, and that the gut is a big part of how we make decisions about the future and what we're going to do. But if your guts are full of parasites, then it's actually the parasites that are making the future, and they're making a future in which you feed the parasites. So I had a strange thing happen after Christmas, was that one of my teeth here got extremely sore in the gums because the gum was rotting, and ultimately I had to get pulled, and ultimately the dentist had to give me antibiotics so that the drugs that numb out your mouth would work, type of thing, because there was too much pus around the tooth root. So my kind of theory there is that the antibiotics actually killed off my probiotics in my gut biomes. But because of advice from friends, I was aware that I needed to feed probiotics and yogurts and sauerkraut and stuff to my guts after the antibiotics, which essentially means that I've been growing healthy guts since getting the tooth pulled, which means that my vagus nerve is actually functioning well, which means that I am being able to rest, which means that I am being able to feel the future that I want to live, and images from that future are coming to my mind while I'm resting, while my conscious mind is listening to all this channel stuff that I've been listening to for the last 10, 12 days. Kind of thing. Various people all saying much the same thing, but from the fifth and fourth dimensions rather than encased in the trauma masks of their victimhood third dimensions. So yeah, that's just a short note. Another thought I had is that, okay, the idea that time had a beginning, the idea that civilization is 6,000 years old, but more so in stuff I've been looking into with the Garden of Eden story in Genesis at the very start of the Bible. And the idea about that it's Adam's apple. Adam's apple here is about vocalizing, and God means to invoke. And so the Garden of Eden is actually describing the birth of Homo sapiens, who are speaking words of a labeled language, invoking essentially a virtual world in the mind where we're projecting a future. So the whole fall from grace in the garden is actually Neanderthals becoming Homo sapiens, going from having no memory like in Lemuria to having a memory projected into a technology that is the mind, an artificial intelligence that is the Homo sapien mind, which now, thousands of years later, whatever, we have made into the, or has become, or has created itself from our subconscious invocations to become an external mirror of the artificial intelligence that actually runs our operating systems that we call the ego. So in the Garden of Eden, the story of the fall is actually the story of developing an Adam's apple and a prefrontal cortex that can imagine the futures and remembers past and creates a future from the past, no longer in the moment having been the moo, the moment having been previous to the fall type of thing. And the interesting thing that says to me is that the difference between Neanderthal man to Homo sapien man, that's a new age. That's a transformation of augmentation. That's a vast difference. So the Neanderthal man developed the ability to speak, think, remember, and project futures. And whatever this transformation that we're apparently going on these days into the new earth is a similar level of transformation. We're developing extra abilities compared to Homo sapien man, which is essentially to have the sensitivity of the Lemurians as well as the technology of the Atlanteans, and this third strand these days is the child of those two, which is the heart field of bodily perfection, I suppose might be one way of saying it. Perfecting the ideal of the body, kind of thing. But anyway, they're just ideas. Do give us a bit of feedback there if you find this stuff interesting, because the feedback does actually work quite a bit to actually encourage me that it's worth recording these things, because somebody's actually listening and going, wow, I haven't heard that anywhere else, or I have heard that somewhere else, and sharing more knowledge round and round. Yeah, and maybe those little insights, they help me realise that actually feeling tired doesn't mean that my body is dying or something. It actually just means that my mind is giving space to receive information from the future for which timeline I'd like to live in. And that must be going on with us all individually. The other thing I was going to say, yes, if time has a beginning, as in the Garden of Eden, and beginning to remember and project onto the future with our Adam's apple, invoking being the creator God oneself, and being responsible for the sins being slightly off mark with what we intended. Time has a beginning and time has an ending. And it may well be, for example, that the time ended on summer solstice, that the fifth dimension has now come down to the third dimension. That would be the end of time. But we humans are individual individual consciousness is able to generate enough time to keep fooling ourselves that we're still living in time, still having memory, still projecting futures. But time itself may have ended, but we're living in the illusion that time is still continuing. And until we let go of that illusion, the veil doesn't fully lift for us individually. And that will explain how come some people are just ploughing away, living in a 3D world and experiencing time and separation, while others of us are experiencing being in a 5D world where we just don't really see the separation anymore. We're just not really doing our heads in the way it used to. There's sunset. Bye bye.